Well, hello, everyone. This is Al Fadi, and with me here in studio is our dear brother Sam Shamoun. And today's topic, as the title stated, and I have to admit, I am personally have yet to find a single evidence that there is this or that. So I don't want to speculate, and I don't want to reach conclusions. And I thought maybe Sam and I talked about it. I said, Sam, why don't you come on the show? And let's just unpack it from an apologetic standpoint. And I'm so thankful that you agreed to do so, Sam.
Now, thank you for having me, brother. If we go just with the Islamic sources, Allah of Islam is none other than Baal. If you know your Bible and you know your Old Testament history, the chief competitor for the devotion of the true God, causing the people of God to abandon their pure worship of the true God, was Baal worship, was Baal. Now, that said, brother, I'm going to now demonstrate to you that Baal or Baal is simply Satan under disguise. So the worship of Baal is none other than the worship of Lucifer, of Satan, even though people at that time, and even today, like Muslims, do not know they're worshiping Satan, because this is Satan under disguise, masquerading himself, charading himself. Now, here's what's even more interesting, if you guys don't know this. If you actually carefully examine all the pagan religions, you'll find that all the pagan gods and goddesses are mutations of the same gods and goddesses. And their stories were changed slightly, but it's the same gods and goddesses. For example, Baal to the Greeks is Zeus. And Zeus in Latin is Jupiter. The Romans worship Zeus as Jupiter. And Zeus is Baal. And he too has a consort, and so on and so forth it goes. And what's the point? The point is that Islam is nothing more than the reemergence of the worship of Baal under another disguise, another mutation of Baal worship, Satan erecting a different form of Baal worship in order to deceive people into worshiping Allah, who's none other than Baal, as the God of the Bible. So the same Baal who was a thorn in the side of God's people, enticing them away from the worship of the true God in order to worship him along with God or as God, is now reemerged as Islam. That's my conviction. That's what I believe. And I believe the Islamic sources will confirm it. Now, further confirmation that Baal is the name of Satan. Brother, if you can go to Mark 3, let's read 22 to 27. Mark 3, 22 to 27.
And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem were saying, he is possessed by Beelzebul.
Notice the word Baal again. Baal Zebul, the Lord of the house, the Lord of the flies. By twisting the word, the Jews made mockery, saying he's not the Lord of any house, he's the Lord of the flies. But who is Beelzebub? Now, brother, finish it to 27.
By the prince of demons, he cast out the demons. And he called them to him and said to them in parables, how can Satan cast out Satan?
Satan cast out who, brother?
Satan.
So wait, he just identified Beelzebul as Satan?
Right.
And Jesus said Beelzebul is who?
Satan.
No debate, right? Jesus just identified Beelzebub as Satan. He just told you that's Satan. Our Lord Jesus, who's God in the flesh, who created heaven and earth, no one is more qualified than Jesus to know who Beelzebub or Beelzebul is. And he just told you it's Satan. In other words, our Lord Jesus, who created heaven and earth and created Satan, is telling you this Baal that the people are worshiping is not a non-existent statue. Baal is an actual spirit figure who actually exists. It's a spirit creature rebelling to God, and it's none other than Satan. Now, that said, with this as a background, let's begin. What do the Muslim sources say about the idol Baal, the chief god of the Kaaba, according to the Muslim sources? The chief deity of the Meccans was a deity called Baal. The Muslim sources confirm this idol was imported from the Moabites. Archaeology and the Old Testament confirm, and the Old Testament is historically accurate. The Moabites worshipped Baal. In other words, Baal is nothing more than the Arabization of the words Ha-Baal, the Baal. And guess what? I'm going to cite Muslim scholars admitting this. Let's begin. Okay, here. Now, some of these scholars I cite, they are not Islamophobes. They're not anti-Muslim Christian missionaries. They are bona fide scholars that teach Islam on an academic level, like F.E. Peters. In his book, Hajj, The Muslim Pilgrimage to Mecca and the Holy Places, pages 24 to 25. Notice what he says here. Among the gods worshipped by the Quraysh, the greatest was Hubal. So notice he's saying the greatest gods of the Quraysh, Muhammad Shai, was Hubal. Some additional details on this cleromantic deity. The most powerful of the pagan idols of Mecca is supplied by the Meccan historian Azraqi. Now he's quoting a Muslim scholar, a medieval Muslim scholar, Al-Azraqi. Quoting him, Amr ibn Luhay brought with him to Mecca an idol called Hubal from the land of Hit in Mesopotamia. Hubal was one of the Quraysh's greatest idols, so he set it up at the well inside of the Kaaba and ordered the people to worship it. Thus, a man coming back from a journey would visit it and circumambulate the house before going to his family and would shave his hair before it. Now, Peter has a footnote, page 365, saying, Other sources say that it came from northern Jordan. Where did he bring it? Mesopotamia, from Jordan. What was prevalent in Jordan before Muhammad? Baal worship. Now, Martin Lings, a convert to Islam, recognized a bona fide Muslim scholar, he passed away. In his highly acclaimed English translation on the biography of Muhammad, his life based on the earliest sources, page 5. Look what he says. Khuza'a thus shared the guilt of Jurhum. They were also to blame in other respects. A chieftain of theirs, on his way back from a journey to Syria, had asked the Moabites. Who? The Moabites. Read your Old Testament history, folks. It's documented. The Moabites, the Ammonites, they worship Baal, to give him one of their idols. They gave him Hubal, which he brought back to the sanctuary, setting it up within the Kaaba itself, and it became the chief idol of Mecca. Now, before I move on, brethren, Christians, non-Christians, do you see what the sources are admitting? Hubal comes from the Moabites, either in Syria and Jordan, because the Moabites, Ammonites, they are the descendants of Lot that settled in Jordan and Syria. He asked them for an idol. They gave him the idol of Hubal. Now, remember, Hubal is the Arabic corruption. They would not have called it Hubal. What do you think they would have called it? Baal. Here you have proof. It is Baal that became the chief god of Mecca. It is Baal that became the chief god of the Kaaba. It is Baal that became the chief god of Muhammad's clan, the Quraysh. What more proof do you need? But it's going to get worse. Let me read some more. Ibn Kathir, Volume 1, page 42. Ibn Hisham states that a learned man told him that Amr bin Luhay once left Mecca for Syria on business and reached Ma'ab, possibly the Moabites. Ma'ab meaning Moab, in the Balka region. There at that time lived the Amalekites. You catch it? Read your Old Testament history. They were saturated in the worship of Baal. The son of Imlak, or as some say, Imlak bin Lawad bin Sam, meaning Shem bin Noah. Amr witnessed them worshiping idols. So he asked them why. They replied that if they asked the idols for rain, it came. Oh my goodness. If they asked the idols for rain, it came. For victory, they won it. Guess what Baal was considered? The god of fertility, the storm god. Oh boy. Is it becoming clear as day? This idol, Hubal, is Baal, so that Mecca became a center of Baal worship? My goodness, it's going to get worse.
Yeah, I want to mention one thing, Sam, and I'm sure you're aware of that. You know that in Islam, there's a prayer for rain also.
The god of fertility, the god of rain.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so welcome to the wonderful world of Islam. So let's continue. Okay, here's another quote. Karen Armstrong, folks. You don't get more friendlier to Islam than Karen Armstrong, a useful idiot.
No kidding. I tell people, if I ever see you reading a book about Islam by Karen Armstrong, I'd rather for you to read the Quran than to read Karen Armstrong.
Guys, look what she says. Karen Armstrong, Muhammad, a biography of the Prophet. At the time of Muhammad, the Kaaba was officially dedicated to the god Hubal. You know why that's an ironic statement, guys? She'll tell you in her work that Allah is not Hubal, Hubal is not Allah, because obviously she's a useful idiot appeasing Muslim sentiments. Because she was really a scholar, she wouldn't say that. But still, she's honest enough to admit, because the sources force her to admit, at the time of Muhammad, the Kaaba was officially dedicated to the god Hubal, a deity who had been imported into Arabia. Now, you're going to love this. Karen Armstrong says Hubal was a deity who had been imported into Arabia from the Nabateans in what is now Jordan. But the preeminence of the shrine was, as well as a common belief in Mecca, seems to suggest that it may have been dedicated originally to Allah, the high god of the Arabs. Talk about a contradiction. Well, let me again break down two facts here. She admits the Kaaba was officially dedicated to the god Hubal. She can't deny that. That's a fact from the Islamic sources. She also admits Hubal was imported from the Nabateans who were in Jordan, confirming Dan Gibson's thesis that Islam, in some sense, does trace its origins, its roots to the north in Jordan. But wait, the god worshipped there would have been Baal, further reinforcing Hubal is Baal. But then notice what she says, because she, again, wants to appease the Muslims in denying that Allah is Hubal. Look what she says here. But the preeminence of the shrine, as well as a common belief in Mecca, seems to suggest it may have been dedicated originally to Allah, the high god of the Arabs. Sorry, Karen Armstrong, because the high god of the Arabs at Mecca was Hubal. He was their high god, their great god, their chief god. So if Allah was the title they used for the high god, and yet the high god of the Arabs in Mecca was Hubal, you just indirectly admit it, though you don't want to come out and say it. Allah was the name of Hubal. Hubal was Allah, Allah was Hubal.
And she did a preemptive, strike just to prevent attacks against her, obviously. But, even the Quran acknowledged that the pagans worshipped a god by the name Allah.
But they'll tell you, oh, because they're Ishmaelites, you kafir. No, there's absolutely no shred of pre-Islamic historical, archaeological, biblical evidence that the Arabs in Mecca are Ishmaelites if you go with the traditional Islamic narrative, right? So no, that won't work, that won't wash. Abraham never went to Mecca, Ishmael never settled in Mecca, never married a woman from Jurhum, 2 women to be exact. Sorry, but thank you for indirectly confirming my thesis, Karen Armstrong. Brother, we're having a field day, aren't we?
Absolutely. I mean, you haven't even touched probably on a crescent and a star, but
Right.
maybe that's a different
Maybe
show.
we'll come back. Now, I'm going to quote her again from another book, but I'm not going to quote all of it. I'm going to quote the relevant parts. The black stone and the shrine, she admits, are associated with Hubble. This is now from her book, Karen Armstrong, Islam, A Short History. They would circle the shrine 7 times, following the direction of the sun and the earth, kiss the black stone. She's saying the pagans did this, admitting licking, smooching, smothering the black stone is a pagan practice. Kiss the black stone embedded in the wall of the Kaaba, which was probably a meteorite that had once hurled to the ground. Now, skipping over to the relevant part, officially, she again admits in this other book, officially, the shrine was dedicated to Hubble, a Nabatean deity, and there was 360 idols arranged around the Kaaba, probably representing the days of the year. Did you catch it? The official god of the Kaaba is Hubble, BAAL, a Nabatean deity. Well, you can't have your cake and eat it too, Karen Armstrong. If the shrine is officially dedicated to Hubble, then that means he's the only god of the shrine. You can't have more than one god. Therefore, if you're going to go and say that Allah was the god of the Kaaba, and yet the Kaaba was dedicated to Hubble, you are indirectly making my thesis. Allah was the name of Hubble, Hubble was Allah. And then later on, the Muslims disassociated Allah from Hubble, so that connection was lost upon them, so that Muslims are duped into thinking Allah of the Kaaba is the God of Abraham, when in reality, Allah of the Kaaba is Hubble, Hubble is Baal, Baal is Satan, Islam is modern day satanic worship, Luciferian worship. But by Muhammad's day, now notice this, talk about being useful idiot and appeasing Muslims. But by Muhammad's day, it seems, notice again, folks, it seems that the Kaaba was venerated as the shrine of Allah, the high God, and it was a mark of widespread conviction Allah was the same as a deity worshipped by the monotheists, that those Arabs and northern tribes on the borders of the Byzantine Empire, who had converted Christianity, used to make the Hajj alongside the pagans. Did you see what she said? When it comes to Hubble, she's on solid ground. She says, Hubble, chief god of the Kaaba, of Mecca, imported from Syria, Nabatean deity. But then notice, when she wants to talk about Allah, she's now simply hypothesizing. It seems, see, now she's not on strong ground anymore, right? It seems Allah was the God of the monotheists who had converted to Christianity. It seems, because she has no proof. You see the point? She has absolutely no proof for that assertion that Allah, the God of the Kaaba, wasn't the same as Hubble. And why would she do that? Because she has to appease Muslims. Because if she comes out and says Hubble was Allah, Allah was the name of Hubble, end of story, she'll be vilified, demonized, and even threatened. Now, here's what's going to blow your minds away. This really is going to blow your minds away. Did you know, brother, the word Samad, you know, in Surah Al-Ikhlas, where it says, Qul Allahu Ahad, Allahu Samad. Do you know that according to a renowned Jewish scholar of Islam, which I'm going to quote in a minute, we have found in Ugaritic inscriptions, because I don't know if you are aware of this, archaeological excavations uncovered artifacts and tablets from Ugarit, which is in Canaan. And these tablets and artifacts gave us a window into understanding the worship of the Canaanites at the time of Moses and Abraham. These are ancient tablets, further confirming, solidifying the historical accuracy of the Old Testament. They found an inscription to Baal where he's called Samad.
Yeah, and you begin to see the connections.
Yeah. I know some Muslims are saying, what? Let me read it. Guys, this comes from Franz Rosenthal, not an Islamophobe. Now, he posits a possible origin of the word. This is what he says, guys. There's enough room for suspicion to permit us having a look at some outside evidence. There we encounter, in other words, instead of looking for an Arabic origin, let's go outside of Arabia to see if we can find an origin for the word Samad. There we encounter a noteworthy phenomenon. The not infrequent religious connotation of the root Samad. In Ugaritic, Samad appears as a stick or club that is wielded by Baal. Samad is the word referring to the club that the false god Baal would wield. In the Kilamu inscription, line 15, we find Baal Samad, owner of the club. Apparently Baal as the owner of his divine club. In the Bible, the adherence of the Israelites to Baal of Peor is expressed by the Nepal of the word samad. The verb is translated by the Septuagint, the Greek translation, as hatelusi, hatelusi. Numbers 25:3 and verse 5, and Psalm 106:28. The use of the verb doubtlessly reflects North Canaanite religious terminology. From Arabic sources, we learn that an idol of Ad was allegedly called Samud. So an idol of a false god called Samud, which brings us rather close to the environment of Muhammad. In view of this material, the suggestion may be made that as-Samad in the Quran is a survival of an ancient Northwest Semitic religious term, which may no longer have been understood by Muhammad himself, nor by the old poets, if the Sawahid should be genuine. This suggestion would well account for the presence of the article with the word in the Quran, and it would especially well account for the hesitation of the commentators vis-a-vis so prominent passage. Such hesitation is what we would expect if we are dealing with a pagan survival from the earlier period of the revelation. I'm almost done, guys, but did you catch it? Samad was the term used by the Canaanites, as evidenced by these discoveries at Ugarit in Canaan, for the club that Baal would wield. So this confirms that if Hubal is Baal, then Samad would have been associated with Hubal, because Hubal, being Baal, would be known as the Lord of the club that Baal wields in making war.
And guess what?
Go ahead,
Chapter 112 of the Quran, the one that Muslims use to prove the doctrine of Tawheed, whatever, uses the term قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدْ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدْ.
Wow.
There you have it, right there. Association with Allah.
Now, guys, we're going to go to the final section, which will be the knockout. Remember, these are Muslim sources. They wanted to disassociate Allah from Hubal. Hubal is Baal, and Hubal required human sacrifice. Sound familiar? Human sacrifice. Now, Abdul Muttalib is Muhammad's grandfather. Let me just give you a quick summary, and we're going to read the sources. Abdul Muttalib made an oath, supposedly to Allah. He said to Allah, if you give me 10 sons, and they live to be old enough to defend me, I will sacrifice one of my sons to you. First question to ask, who is this Allah that would give a man 10 sons in order to sacrifice one of his sons to him? Because remember what Muslims are telling us. Muslims are telling us Allah of the pagans was actually the God of Abraham. Now, in the sources that I'm about to read, Abdul Muttalib had 10 sons, and only 10 sons. That means Allah answered his prayer. Now, can I ask you a question? Why would Allah answer this man's prayer to give him 10 sons, to kill one of them if he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Can you explain that to me? Why would Allah, if he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, honor his request? Because that's what he said. I'm going to read it to you. If you give me 10 sons, I will kill one of them as a sacrifice to appease you, to honor you. Why not just give him 9 sons and stop? Why give him 10 in order for him to now feel obligated to murder one of his sons to appease Allah? This in no way is the God of the Bible. Sorry, Muslims. This is in your tradition, proving that Allah is Satan, that Islam is Luciferian worship. Even though Muslims don't know this, may God save them. Now let's go to the citations. What's going to be clear from what you read is as he goes to fulfill his vow, Abdul Muttalib does 2 other things. It says he goes to the statue of Hubal and takes the divination arrows in order to get Hubal to agree to accept camels as atonement to save the son that he's going to kill. And the son that he's going to kill is Abdullah, who becomes the father of Muhammad. How convenient. Now, I want to know this. Why is he going to the statue Hubal to do this? And then as you read, he actually goes to a female witch who consults a demon, a spirit, to tell her what to tell Abdul Muttalib to do to spare his son from being killed. And then the spirit, that demon tells her, he takes her advice, goes to the statue of Hubal, prays to Allah, how many camels will you accept so that my son is spared? Why is Allah accepting Abdul Muttalib to go to a kahin, a female witch who contacts demons to give her information so that he then does what that demon tells him to do and goes to the statue of Hubal, praying to Allah to accept camels in the place of his son? What in the world is going on here if Allah is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob?
She's basically overpowering Allah as well, right?
Yeah. And from a spirit, a demon, she goes, go away, let me contact my spirit, see what he's going to tell me. A kahina, a female witch, a demon. Who said this? Ibn Kathir. Now, who's going to accuse Ibn Kathir of being an Islamophobe? So they went to the Kaaba to who? Their god, Hubal. Here's a citation from the article. So they left for Medina, where they found a diviner whose name was Saja. As Yunus bin Bukayr reported from Ibn Ishaq, was at Khaybar. They rode off again, went to her, and sought her advice. Watch, guys. Abdul Muttalib telling her of the whole problem regarding him and his son. She told him, leave me today until what? My attendant spirit comes and I can ask him, Muslims, who saved your Abdullah, the father of your Muhammad? A female witch who's possessed, inspired by a demon, a spirit, a jinn. A jinn saved the father of your prophet. And a jinn influenced Abdul Muttalib how to appease Allah. So Allah acquiesced to the suggestion of a jinn, a demon, a spirit, who inspired a female witch, a kahina. And this is Islam. Now let me read the last paragraph. So they went back to Mecca. When they had agreed to do as she had said, Abdul Muttalib said prayers to God. Then they offered up Abdullah and the 10 camels as sacrifice and cast the arrow. At that point, the men of Quraysh told Abdul Muttalib, who was standing near Hubble, the idol Hubble. Guys, why is he standing before the statue Hubble and asking Allah, Allah, how many camels will you accept for my son Abdullah? 10? The arrow fell for Abdullah. Kill him. All right, add 10 more. 20? It still fell on Abdullah. Until he got 100, then the arrow pointed to the camels. And he did it 2 more times, total 3 times. So he goes to Hubble and prays to Allah. Game over, folks.
Yeah, I guess he's praying to Allah to intercede between him and Hubble, because Hubble is more powerful than Allah, right?
That's it.
If we want to make that claim that they're separate and they're different.
Now, let me deal with this stupid objection by the Muslims that tell you they don't think critically. Brother, they refuted my entire thesis. You know why?
Oh.
Because they just quoted chapter 37, verse 125 of the Quran, where it mentioned Al-Yasin, who's supposedly Elijah, and says, you know, are you going to worship Baal or Allah, the breast of creator? See, Baal is not Allah. Now, you don't need to be a genius. You just need to be smarter than Muhammad, not as stupid as Muhammad and as God. Who told you that the Arab pagans at that time knew that the name Baal was the same as Hubble? Because notice in that passage, what's the name? It's not Hubble. Brother, can you do me a favor? We'll wrap it up there. Can you go to chapter 37, 125 of the Quran? And what's the Arabic name for Baal there?
So I posted the verse right here in Arabic. أتدعون بعلا. That's the word. أتدعون بعلا وتذرون أحسن الخالقين. It didn't say that you are leaving Allah. All it's saying is you're worshiping Baal and you're not worshiping the best of creators. That's it.
And brother, Baalin, Baal. Does that sound like Hubble?
No, I mean it's the word is inflicted actually, because grammatically you have to say it this way, ba'lan, you know. So in fact, it could be a generic reference just to an idol. That's all.
My point. It's narrating the story. It's narrating the story of Elijah, calling him Elias and then Eliasin. So obviously the author of the Quran has heard Elijah's showdown with the prophets of Baal. So he's narrating it. See, Elijah told the Israelites, are you going to worship Baal or the best of creators? Which he never said best of creators, but put that aside. Just because the author of the Quran is narrating a biblical story where Baal is condemned by a true prophet, doesn't mean the author of the Quran knew that Hubble is Baal. And so in condemning Baal, he's condemning Hubble, because Hubble is not the same as Baal at that time. They would not have known the connection and association. Hello, Ummiyun. Can you stop being so illiterate? But anyway, that wraps it up. You have now overwhelming proof from Islamic sources. Hubble is none other than Baal, and Hubble is the Arabicized or Arabic bastardization of the name Ha-Baal, which would have been lost to the pagans at that time, like was lost on Muhammad and his God. And Hubble was the chief god of the Kaaba, the chief god of Mecca, the chief god of Quraysh, who demanded human sacrifice. And as the chief god, he was a high god, and the high god would have been called Allah. So Allah was the name of Hubble. Hubble is Baal. And according to the Bible, Baal is the name of Satan. So at the end of the day, Islam is modern day Baal worship. Even though the Muslims don't know this, we know it by the grace of the Triune God. And Baal worship is Luciferian worship. What more proof do you want that Allah of the Quran is Satan? May the Lord Jesus erase Islam, destroy this false God, and save Muslims and strengthen the church for the glory of Jesus. Christ is risen, risen indeed.